You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
We made it. The 111th Grey Cup is here. I'm Travis Currah here with Sheldon Jones. The Grey Cup is such a fascinating week because the rumor mill is always churning. There's always a big topic that's being talked about at Grey Cup, whether it's expansion, whether it's new rules, whether it's a new commissioner, and it remains to be seen, what the big chat about Grey Cup is going to be. But then it's also mixed in with fans across Canada embarking on one city and celebrating the great Canadian Football League for the 111th time. I get chills talking about it, man. It was a long road till we got here, and by the time that Two and Out Nation hears this, many will be on the way or in Vancouver or maybe on a plane. So thanks for taking us with you wherever you go and listening to the show that way. This is my 15th Grey Cup, so I can say that I'm not in the 50s like a lot of those folks, but I've seen some changes. I've seen good Grey Cups. I've seen, just about every damn game's a banger. I've seen enough games where we think that one team is going to annihilate the other for it to turn into a classic, a nail biter, an upset. But Sheldon, I'm trying to remember here. You were at the last two Regina Grey Cups. You were at the 100th Grey Cup in Toronto. Is that what you have under your belt? Is this your first Grey Cup on the West Coast?
It is for sure my first Grey Cup on the West Coast. I've been to all four Grey Cups in Regina, and I've been to the one in Toronto. So this will be my sixth, technically, Grey Cup.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm not the greatest role model, but it's been 10 years since the Grey Cup was last in Vancouver. I've changed in 10 years. So I'm looking forward to being on the West Coast with a clear mind for much of the trip. Because the last few Grey Cups, I cannot say the same. Although I will give a tip to somebody that's never been to the Grey Cup in Vancouver. You seem to be walking uphill no matter what direction you're going. And I really thought that if I walked downhill to the Grey Cup party, I'd be walking uphill to the hotel. But that never seemed to be the case. So thankfully, Google Maps, I'm going to have some extra charges on me so I can get through a day on the West Coast. And if you're enjoying the game at home, let's get into it and talk about some of the news that has already gone down, because there already was the State of the League address for the media on Tuesday. Now, the fan State of the League is usually Friday mornings in the Grey Cup host city. It's become one of my favorite events to attend, so I'll be there. It'll be Randy Ambrosie's last State of the League address as CFL commissioner. There's always talk about expansion. We do know that COVID basically put an end to the Atlantic Schooners, but there seems to be more and more talk about maybe certain U.S. markets. Quebec, I know I see some people saying London, Ontario, that kind of thing. Now he doesn't believe, or at least he's saying he doesn't believe that U.S. expansion is viable. Pretty interesting. I feel like Randy of 18 months ago might have said, yeah, anything's on the table, but not so much this week.
Yeah, I kind of feel like they were just going to do whatever they could to get a 10th team. I don't know. I think apparently the viewership in the States is doing well. CBS Sports had immediately renewed their deal, I guess, and now it's running currently with the TSN deal till the end of 26. But it's tough because if you go into the U.S. market, then you can't have the ratio due to their work laws or whatever. So that is tough. And I know the last time I was a lot younger when that happened, so I might not have been as into the inner workings of the league, but I know that that was a pretty major sticking point because a lot of those teams, maybe they didn't win a lot of games, but they had a lot of stars and they had a lot of them like all American teams, right? So it'd be interesting. But I think, if they ever did, St. Louis is like a perfect team or city because they've supported the XFL, they supported the UFL, the US. Like every time that they've had some sort of spring football since the Rams left, they supported it. So it'd be quite interesting to see what happens there. But just for quality of schedule and all that stuff, like a 10th team it is really necessary, and could make the Grey Cup a couple weeks earlier, even getting rid of any sort of real danger of a bad weather Grey Cup. So hopefully they can figure this out.
That's one thing that I 100% disagree with. I'm putting that on the record.
I hear you. I know.
I was so relieved when I saw that the Grey Cup in Calgary is happening this weekend. If it was my way, oh man, that December Grey Cup in Hamilton was awesome. But that was Hamilton. If it was in Vancouver, Calgary, Regina, we know there are 4 problem cities. Let's not hide from it.
Well, they play the NFL in Green Bay in February, so we're tough. We got extra padding. We're fine.
I think yeah, and that's probably part of it, but I think it adds to it. Maybe again, 15 Grey Cups. Maybe I'm just becoming an old curmudgeon. You brought up the viewership. Well, the viewership in Canada for the East Final, almost 1.75 million people watching it. That beat the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens on Hockey Night in Canada. So don't let anybody tell you that nobody watches the Canadian Football League, because they are full of it. Talking about the marketing money, now that was a big talking point during the season. They're saying there's going to be an audit process with that. And if the players aren't fulfilling the duties that are supposed to be included when you get some of that marketing money, then it could be added to the cap and the team will be penalized. I think that is a good way to go about it. But the auditing process, there's probably still going to be a lot of gray area in there. But hey, I don't know if Nathan Rourke's going to be blowing off too many interviews in the near future.
Well, yeah. The only thing I can kind of really see, and I hate to go on to this, but so Chad Kelly was given a good amount of money in marketing this year, and for half the season he really wasn't able to do anything. So I think that's probably where this audit process might be able to. And I'm not saying it's going to happen this year, but maybe if something like that happens where a player is suspended or a player, injured and goes home when they have a lot of marketing money tied up. I think I read on Twitter that they might tie it into a certain kind of dollar an hour kind of thing when it comes to player appearances and signings and going to schools, especially going to schools is definitely something that all CFL teams should be doing, because that's definitely a way to tap into the younger market. But I'm really glad to see this. You know what? The more money that owners are willing to spend on their teams to market is good. I don't even care. I know there's not a maximum, and maybe does need to be, but if a team wants to spend $1 million on top of their cap in marketing on 5 or 6 or 10 players, that's a good thing for this league, as long as they can show that marketing money is being used effectively.
The Chad Kelly thing was talked about from earlier this season. Thought that maybe the gender-based violence title of their policy maybe brought along some more harsher rumors to the situation that happened in Toronto. He did say he was satisfied with how he spoke and handled himself during the meetings after he served that 9-game suspension. Now, this is me talking right now. I don't know how to say this, but it's almost like the Kelly injury took a lot of distraction away from the CFL and away from the Argos in this Grey Cup. We know that there's still a lot of negative energy surrounding that situation from earlier in the season. And or maybe Nick Arbuckle is the distraction. I don't know. Can he handle that going into this game? I don't want to say it's a good thing, but it certainly probably changes the narrative a lot going into Sunday.
I think it does. I think there's a few different kind of sects of fans in the league who were outraged about this. Like, there were certain people who were outraged at Kelly himself. There were certain that were at the team as well, just because of keeping him. So you still see that online. You still see a bunch of people who are anti-Argos all the way. And you know what? That's your prerogative. I understand. I struggle with it too. But like, I think him not being in the game, like you say, I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. I think he showed when he came back that he is still the player he was last year. And if, when these programs exist, like the gender-based violence program or initiative or whatever it is built on rehabilitation. And I think that he, like Randy said, he felt satisfied in what he was saying, and that it wouldn't happen again. So I think we have to give a little bit of grace for rehabilitation, but I understand when people won't do that just because that's a sticking point for them, and I completely understand that. But it's tough because, there's people who don't want the Argos to win strictly because they had him on the payroll, and he's not even in the game anymore. So that's kind of a tough thing. But now the spotlight is on Nick Arbuckle, and let's see what he can do. Yeah,
we'll get into that more, because I think it's a fascinating storyline. Randy's talking about game day revenue, saying it's up 7%, and we got 2 more years left in the TSN deal, so we'll see what 2026 brings on that front, and praise the ownership in the league. Says he's satisfied, at least right now, the conversations that Rogers has had with the league regarding their purchase of MLSC. But also already happening this week was the coaches' press conference. You know how these things go. A lot of these guys are coaches are paranoid. They try to hang on to information and things like that.
They didn't want to be there. Neither one of them wanted to be there.
Sometimes it's crazy. Like, these guys are could be the end of a game and they're calling a kneel down and they'll still cover their mouth like victory formation. No, we can't let them know. But I guess that's football. I mean, of course, Dinwiddie's going to have full confidence in Nick Arbuckle here, and O'Shea's going to praise his defensive coordinator, things like that. I guess there were probably questions, and there were, regarding Zach Collaros, if this could be one of his last games as a Winnipeg Blue Bomber. I think at this point, it's probably up to Zach. Probably in a... I mean, if he wins the Grey Cup, or the Bombers going to say, just like Calgary moved on from Bo, and, maybe... At least it seems like Saskatchewan's leaving it up to Harris. And, man... some of the quotes from Trevor Harris in the extra interviews in Saskatchewan is like, he said, if this organization is not feeling that they can win with me, I'm out. And I was like, wow, I was actually pretty shocked by that. But I can't see the Bombers moving on from Zach before the end of next year. That's kind of my feeling here.
Well, yeah, he's under contract for next year. A lot of it is guaranteed. And Mike O'Shea said himself that he's not moving on from him anytime soon. So,
and why would he say before the biggest game of the year, I think in this offseason we'll reevaluate our starting quarterback's position with the
team? I swear, these things are like, there's like 2 stepped fathers at opposite ends, and it's like people are trying to fish for information and nobody wants to give anything up. That's kind of what it. And even like, it was kind of a dumb question by Justin Dunk. I like Dunker, but he even asked Ryan Dinwiddie why he announced Arbuckle was going to be the starter right away. Why didn't he do any games? And he even said, like Coach O'Shea would. And he's like, well, everyone knows he's going to start, so why don't I say he's going to start? Like, it's just, at least it wasn't the dumb sex question. So that's fine.
So that didn't happen?
I don't believe so, unless I missed it, but I don't believe that was asked.
The first time in decades, man.
Unless I missed it, and I know our faithful listeners will let me know in the comments if I did, but I didn't hear it.
Although sometimes it's hard, like as a media guy, to go in there and try to ask some questions, but at this point, try to like ask their favorite color or something, you know. What was your favorite family vacation growing up? Maybe you'll at least get something out of them that way. Mm-hmm. They've announced the Grey Cup Festival Hub. So Genius Sports, a team very popular, a name very popular among CFL diehards, and the league have teamed up for this new website, so you can scan QR codes at festival events. It looks like almost sort of like a scavenger hunt kind of thing, and you can enter to win a trip to the Grey Cup in Winnipeg next year. They've also, like this Grey Cup loyalty club that they've started. So I don't know. They've done a Grey Cup club in the past. In fact, I was the first person to sign up for that. I have my lanyard right here. Travis Currah, founding member of the Grey Cup Club. Now everybody that signed up got one, but as the first member, they send me a game-worn Weston Dressler Saskatchewan Roughriders jersey. I should try that on.
After a few drinks, maybe.
It would not be pretty. Weston Dressler is all of what, 5'7", if we're being generous, on cleats.
Yeah.
I
don't think it's really the length of the jersey that'd be the problem, though.
That's fair. But anyway, they're doing some cool things. They got this loyalty thing going on. It'll probably include Grey Cup presale and things like that. But that's pretty cool. Now, before we'll talk some off the field news. The Calgary Stampeders signing PJ Walker to a 2-year deal here. And it's a team-friendly deal. It's low 100s. Of course, there's playing time incentives included in this, but that tells me that they're still going to be in the Vernon Adams sweepstakes come the offseason here. And maybe similar quarterbacks, similar skill sets. And I think any quarterback new to the CFL at this point can learn a thing or two from Big Play VA.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of teams that would be dumb not to be in the Vernon Adams sweepstakes. So, but a guy like PJ, he's had success in the XFL. He's played a handful of games in the NFL. He's got, that football pedigree, and it looks like he might be pretty well suited to the Canadian game. So, I was kind of hoping to get a look at him that last game when Calgary came to Saskatchewan, but then they decided not, which kind of confused me. They decided not to because he wouldn't be able to sign the NFL, and now they've signed him again. Like, I know he probably has an out if somebody from the NFL calls, but interesting. But again, obviously, I think the Stamps are moving on from Jake Mayer, and so this is the first step in that plan, and we'll see who the second step is.
Thursday brings us the CFL Awards. So I'm just going to, go through the nominees here, and then maybe we'll predict our winners. Let's do it one at a time. MOP, Brady Oliveira and Bo Levi Mitchell. I do not have a single clue where this is going.
It'll be Brady.
I'm thinking that too. I don't know if this might not be popular with some, but last year with Chad Kelly getting the award, I felt like, he's in Toronto, the golden boy, he's getting a lot of money, he's let's give him the award, you know? And it was kind of funny because it came, 5 days after a 6 interception performance, but
But at least he at least took them to 15 of the 16. Yeah, but did he play in that? I can't remember if he won all 16. Sure. But yeah, so at least in that case, that's the difference between him and Bo Levi. He led his team to first place, and Bo, and it's not necessarily his fault, but he got fourth place.
Football's the ultimate team sport. And Toronto has solid special teams, obviously. Solid defense, obviously. Hamilton struggled in both of those phases until Chris Jones arrived. And their special teams, I know the kicking was all right, but the coverage and the returns, it wasn't there for the Ticats. If they had better areas there, maybe they are a playoff team. It feels like a make good, and I think Brady's going to get it, yeah.
I think Brady is the new golden boy. I think he's the guy that maybe the league is gonna, because I'm fairly certain he's gonna win 2, and the CFL's cowards because they knew the Milligan would win 2. Just kidding. Had to get that in there for all my green goggles guys.
And we gotta save the puppies, and that's what Brady Oliveira does. So
Brady, if he could just stop slamming his head and doing the whole Andrew Harris thing, I'd like him a lot more, but I already like him a lot, so we're all good there.
I think Roland Milligan's going to win Most Outstanding Defensive Player over Tyrese Beverette. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too.
I think that, obviously, if Brady is going to win, even if he doesn't, he's going to win MOC, Most Outstanding Canadian. I think Most Outstanding Offensive Lineman, it's Logan Ferland of the Riders and it's Ryan Hunter of the Argos. I kind of think they're going to go Hunter here. But
I think they are too. It's just, Hunter was elite at one spot, and Ferland was good to great at most spots. So I know I'm a Rider homer, blah, 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 but I think Ferland does deserve this one, but I think they will give it to Hunter too.
He's the left tackle of the Argos, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think voters will look at that, what he does, and what he does, obviously, very well. I think Janarian Grant probably going to win Most Outstanding Special Teams Player over Sean White. And I think Nick Anderson of the Elks is going to win Most Outstanding Rookie over Shamar Bridges.
Yeah, but it should have been Polk.
Yeah.
I think it should have been Polk. But, I think Nick Anderson wins, too. I think Bridges had a great, first half or whatever, and then, unfortunately, the injury kind of took him out there. But he was pretty outstanding for the games that he did play. So, close call, but I think Anderson will take it.
Now, Coach of the Year, Corey Mace or Jason Moss. Normally, we see at least one of the Coaches of the Year in the game. This year, neither. Actually, we could see a lot of award winners that aren't playing, which doesn't normally happen.
Other than here. Brady, yeah.
Yeah. I know Toronto maybe has a couple here.
Maybe.
Maybe they give it to Moss. Saskatchewan had a pretty big turnaround though, and a rookie.
I think that's what's going to do it. Like it's and he's he's not going to be happy with it either. I don't think, because I don't think he's. But Toronto. I mean Montreal. Moss did a great job for the first 9 games when they were 8-1. Then they kind of hit their slump, but they improved over last year. So it's a tough one. This is a toss-up. But I think just the turnaround, taking a team that hadn't won after Labor Day 2 consecutive seasons to within an act of God of finishing first place possibly in the West. It's a toss-up.
But
Ryder
honestly,
Homer says Mace, but Moss deserves it too. Like, I don't know.
Honestly, do you think that they need to get rid of the divisional one from each? Being up for these awards, like Mike O'Shea, the team starts 2-6 in Winnipeg. Everybody thinks they're done, and they win the West, and they go to the Grey Cup again. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I wonder if they just get tired of putting the same guys, on the bill. And I bring that up too because, look, Isaac Adeyemi Berglund out of Montreal. Yeah, he had a great season on the D-line as a Canadian. 7 sacks there, forced fumble, 36 tackles. But the CFL's leading receiver is Justin McInnis, and he's nowhere to be found on any of them because they can only pick one out of the West. And if they're going to make Brady the MOP, well, he by default has to be the West nominee for the MOC. So it's an interesting conversation to have anyway. And if you would like to chime in on who's going to be winning the awards, just hit us in the comments on YouTube and keep that discussion going before the big awards night on Thursday. Now this brings us to, a lot of beers in between the Grand National Drunk. And then all of a sudden, the game will come on Sunday. And all of a sudden, we will feel very sad because there will be no more Canadian football games to watch between the Vanier Cup the next weekend and the CFL regular season starting in the June. So we better mention the U Sports happening in Regina. It's going to be Laval and Regina, and then Laurier and Bishops. Those 4 teams battling to go to the college football Canadian Championship, the Vanier Cup. So best of luck to all involved. But then we have the Toronto Argonauts and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The Bombers, obviously, and I don't think this is much of a surprise, heavy favorites, 9.5 points. However, I do find that quite juicy. If I was a betting man, I don't think I would feel too comfortable betting on Winnipeg to cover that spread. Now, every year is different, but I do find the trends in Grey Cups fascinating. Like the Argos have won 7 straight Grey Cup games. They haven't lost one since 1987. This is absolutely crazy. They're 9-0 in Grey Cup games against Winnipeg teams. And one does include the Royal Canadian Air Force Winnipeg team. Like, it goes that far back. Undefeated against the Bombers in Grey Cups. Now, obviously, teams from the 1930s do not relate to today. But the way that these trends continue in Grey Cup games are quite fascinating to me. There seems to be some sort of magic that happens when a Toronto team makes it to the Grey Cup, whether it's winning in the snow and having a 100-yard fumble recovery against the Calgary Stampeders in Ottawa, or blocking a field goal kick against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Regina in the Grey Cup. I don't know what it is about these Argos, but once they get to the big game, once they get to the dance, they seem to win. And it's an interesting thing to talk about. Yeah, it's a depressing thing as a Rider fan to see 9-0 in Grey Cup games against a single team. Yeah, and if you look at this season, they were 2-0 against Winnipeg, and those games were like within like 3 or 4 or 5 points, both of them. Them at 9.5 point dogs. That's I could see some value in that as a non-bettor to see that the game won't be that close. Just because these two teams do have high-powered offenses, but they also have really high-powered defenses. So they match up really well against each other. So I think it's going to be another tight game. Now, I know that, O'Shea goes into the press conference not wanting to give Toronto any bulletin board material, but I almost wonder if that spread organically gives the Argos bulletin board material. They all of a sudden come into this game And I know it's the Grey Cup, and I know things are unfamiliar, and you're playing in Vancouver, and the schedule's crazy, and all this sort of stuff. So there is obviously pressure, and there's outside influences there. But when everybody's expecting you to lose, just like in 2022 in Regina, I think mentally that's got to be freeing for a team. It probably happened to Montreal last year going into that game with Winnipeg. Nobody thinks we belong. Nobody thinks we're going to compete. So here we go. And like you said, the defense, and there are several players that were on that 2022 championship team. They're familiar with this situation. Now, Zach has struggled against this Argos defense. With the way that defensive line plays, Winnipeg's protection needs to be top notch. I cannot see him having the same amount of time as he did in the West Final against the Riders, because the Argos just have a completely different defensive philosophy that way. And you get one hit on Zach Collaros and he gets up slow, and you get another one. It could be a long day at the office for him if that Argo D-line gets rolling.
Absolutely. And you want to hear a crazy stat. In 2 games, the Toronto Argonauts got a quarter of Winnipeg's sacks allowed. 12 sacks they got in 2 games. And Winnipeg gave up 48 all year long.
Wow.
Yeah.
So off the top of my head, they were both ugly games this season. I think Toronto beat Winnipeg 16-14 in overtime. And then the next one was 14-11. So 25 points from this Bomber offense against the Argos in 2 games. We'll say this. We bring up the neutral site and being at BC Place. Zach Collaros is 5-1 there in his career, 12 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and averages 321 passing yards. I think there's been talk, as a Saskatchewan Roughrider fan, Zach Collaros has half of the amount of Grey Cups in Rider history in the last 4 Grey Cups, and a good portion of that fan base hates him. Like, you ungrateful blanks.
I don't know how any Rider fan could hate him.
No, Bomber fans.
Yeah.
They just say that playoff Zach comes around. Now,
I thought that was just other fans saying that. Like,
no, there are Bomber fans that preach that he's average. He's a game manager. But I could look at Bo Levi Mitchell. He's up for MOP, but he's nowhere near the Grey Cup because he didn't have the supporting cast around him to get him to the Grey Cup. So football's a team sport. To me, that's just a silly argument. Like, they're championship teams, you know? So I got to get a Zach jersey. Like, I feel like I'm selling him more than anybody. But I do, even though he played ball in Ohio, right? Or Cincinnati. I think maybe the cold gets to Zach a little bit. Not a concern at BC Place. We don't have to worry about that at all. Crazy wind we've seen in these playoffs. Non-issue here. He's going to be pretty comfortable going in. And, you know, the opposite of the Argos. But the Bombers have to be wearing some sort of pressure. Like, if they lose this one, are they into Calgary Stampeder territory where everybody, you know, painted them as perennial big game losers? Or before the 2 Grey Cups against the Riders, Anthony Calvillo started getting painted that way. They're always in the Grey Cup and they lose. So I feel like Zach's got a lot to prove here on Sunday.
Well, whatever he did in the West Final, maybe he just forgot it was a playoff game, or someone told him it wasn't a playoff game, because he certainly didn't play like playoff Zach. Zach, he probably the best career resurgence I've ever seen from a person who was believed to be done. Yeah, I know he didn't do it all himself, and he has the tools to protect him, or he at least had. And you know, he's a guy who sometimes you can when he gets rattled, he does kind of break down a little bit, and maybe that is the cold weather in the playoffs. But he's also a guy who, when he gets pissed off, he can just throw daggers and put a game out of reach in like a couple series. So, it's I've watched what Toronto's been able to do to him. I don't know if Toronto's schemes are just that confusing or if what it is, but you know that he has a chip on his shoulder seeing his performance in those two games. And he also got to see what he was able to do against the Riders. And so they're going to obviously incorporate some of that stuff into there. And the Argos might be keen on Kenny King Lawler a little bit more this week, and so that what's that going to do? That's going to leave Dembski or Wilson open. So I think just his targets are there, and if the Bombers O line is able to give him time, it could be a non-playoff Zach performance in the Grey Cup.
Banjo Bowl Zach, maybe something like that. Well, let's talk about the other quarterback, man. It's Nick Arbuckle, who, signs with the Argos this year, really under the radar. He goes 65 for 100, 799 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions on the season. But I felt like whenever he came in, and a lot of times it was late in games and the Argos were down, and he would start moving the ball. Like when Dukes wasn't able to do it, Arbuckle starts moving the ball, and you're thinking, man, this he looks good. Mm-hmm. And he's such a great guy. And I thought, and I've talked about it on the show, that, Vernon Adams losing his job and then starting for the BC Lions and then taking them to the Grey Cup in the playoffs, if that happened, it would have been the fairy tale story, of the year. If Nick Arbuckle wins the Grey Cup for the Argos, that might be the bigger fairy tale story of 2024. He seems like he also has nothing to lose. I'm pretty sure he thought his pro football career was over. Then he got the call from a familiar name in Ryan Dinwiddie, somebody he was familiar with back in his Calgary Stampeder days. So he's obviously familiar with the language, familiar with the offensive schemes that they're running, and he was able to really come in sort of seamlessly. And he's going to be starting on Sunday, which is a crazy story, dude.
It is, and we've seen it before, and I don't really have any examples to say because I don't do my research, but, there's been a lot of system quarterbacks where, quarterbacks do good in one system and then maybe they go somewhere else and it's a different system and they're not able to flourish. And he's back in the system that he did get most of his success in when he was with Calgary, and he did, come in when Bo was hurt. He was one of those guys. We said it last week that he was one of those projected next guys up, like James Franklin or, I don't know, other people.
Nick Arbuckle.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so if he is able to put a win here, especially against the Bombers, who are making it to their 5th Grey Cup in a row, that is quite the feather that he could put in his cap. And in any other year, I don't know if it would be remotely possible, but this year has been something else, man.
So the Argos do bring back Brian Scott as the third quarterback for this week. Now he gets released by Toronto, and then he gets signed with Winnipeg, and he spends, I don't know, a few weeks there. I think that's when they brought in Dolegala and him for a brief time. And Scott gets let go. I don't know if he can bring any intel from Winnipeg back to Toronto, but Brian Scott was definitely a popular backup quarterback with Argo fans, and he's back at least for 1 week in the double blue. Now, we look at the stats. Both teams are strong running teams. The Argos are second in the CFL. The Bombers are third. And then you look at the defenses. They almost have polar opposite ways that they play. Because the Argos give up a lot of passing yards. The Bombers don't. The Bombers give up a lot of rushing yards. The Argos don't. So this is going to be a chess match right from opening kickoff, man.
Yeah, two teams haven't matched up this perfectly in a long time in a Grey Cup, I don't think. We have two dynamic rushers. One of them is a little bit more dynamic, I guess, as he's up for 2 awards at the end of the year. But Kadeem Carey is no slouch, and the Argos O-line is no slouch. And Winnipeg has shown that they can be ran against. So if Toronto's able to get that push on the O-line and be able to get it to second and mediums or second and shorts after some good first down rushes, that's going to be the key to victory for them.
And I do think Janarian Grant is an X factor here. He 100%. Was sort of a late addition to the Argos roster at the beginning of the year. Seemed like the Bombers didn't have the budget to bring him back after last year. They had to pay Dalton Schoen. They had to pay Brady Oliveira. And they couldn't pay Janarian Grant. Well, the Argos found room for that. And he had 3 punt return touchdowns this year, 1 kickoff return for a touchdown. The guy has been making things happen this season. You know that he's going to want to have a return touchdown against his former team. Can he make that happen? But even if he breaks a big 35, 40 yarder, that can flip the field in a hurry and help that Argo offense.
That's just it. If he's able to get, them starting at, their 40, their 50 midfield, that gets them within a couple first downs of at least a field goal attempt. And points are a premium, especially this season between the Argos and the Bombers. There hasn't been a lot of points scored, as we previously mentioned. So anything that he can do to help set up the offense for success is going to be paramount.
Now, Kenny the King Lawler, of course, absolutely torching the Rough Riders last week in the West Final. So you do know that he's going to be a focus of the Argo defense. But you brought up, the Argos have plenty of other weapons that they can, or the Bombers do, that the Argos are going to have to focus on. The young guys, not much experience, so that's going to be a challenge for those guys under the bright lights. But Mackay Polk of Toronto, man, he is making things happen. He had 100 yards 3 of the last 4 games of the regular season. He made things happen in the playoff game last week as well. So he's going to be a guy to watch. And they've got the veteran Davaris Daniels, who I think is sort of like the steady Eddie. Maybe he's not going to put up 1,700 yards in a season anymore. But he's been here before. He's been there with Calgary. I remember that picture of him after winning a Grey Cup. He's wearing a Flames jersey and a WWE title over his shoulder. So he's got championship rings. He knows what it takes to win a Grey Cup. He's familiar with Nick Arbuckle playing together back in Calgary as well. So it feels like if one team had to go to a backup quarterback, this could be the most important signing of the year, obviously, for Toronto, because I don't know if any other teams in the CFL would be this comfortable going into a Grey Cup, I actually don't think the Argos are in a terrible spot. I don't think I'm going to pick them to win, but I don't think they're going to get smashed. Let's just say that.
Yeah, like we said, they're the underdogs. Nobody expects them to win. Everyone just expects them to get rolled over. But let's look back in 2007 in a similar situation, when Kevin Glenn broke his arm in the East Final. The Riders were expected to roll all over the Bombers, and they didn't do that. They did win, but they certainly didn't roll over the Bombers. And so I think that, and of course everyone said that was an asterisk Grey Cup for the Riders. So if Winnipeg wins, you guys are getting an asterisk too, just so you're aware. But I think that, like you said, maybe we're not going to pick them to win, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Toronto was able to find a way to win, because it's a 3-phase game, and those other 2 phases are excellent. And we've seen Arbuckle come in and be able to do the job. All he has to do is be a game manager. Nick Arbuckle just needs to be Matt Nichols.
Yeah.
If he can be Matt Nichols, they have just as good a shot as any other team would be.
Man, we know that we joke about them being Calgary East, but man, Arbuckle, Carey, Daniels, McManus
Dinwiddie.
on the defense. Man, you keep McManus away from the ball. That almost seems like a something that the Bombers really need to focus on. And once a team gets rolling, like the turnovers they were forcing against Montreal. Now, Winnipeg at the beginning of the year was making those mistakes. They calmed it down. By the way, the extra mics that they had during the division finals caught an amazing moment with Mike O'Shea talking to rookie receiver Kevin Claircius, because I actually just learned this as well, talking to Eddie Steele, who is a Grey Cup champion in this league. I said, how do you guys play in this cold weather? Well, those defensive players, they rub Vaseline all over their arms, but they're not trying to catch a ball. When O'Shea found that Claircius did this, he's like, you're not going to be able to hang out of the ball. I thought that was an amazing moment that the mics caught on last weekend.
It was hilarious. O'Shea actually had 2 good moments. One of them wasn't so PG. A couple F-bombs made their way before they cut away from him. But yeah, no, it was. I didn't notice it during the game itself, but I saw the clips after, and I just was busting a gut because. And leave it to a receiver who wants to, when I played football, when we had games, if an O-lineman ever had sleeves or anything, oof.
Did you do the Vaseline or no?
No. I didn't know about that back then, but I'm just saying, like, receivers always had the sleeves. I know the sleeves, right?
Like,
but as an O-lineman, we never, we couldn't even think about a sleeve.
You skinny pretty boys.
Yeah.
That's the 111th Grey Cup. There's going to be a lot of things to talk about, I think, after the game. The things that we discover during the week, like the Elks, they're going to be trying to figure out their new GM, and they were denied by Ryan Rigmaiden of the BC Lions. He said, no, I don't want to talk to the Elks. So there's one name we can cross off the list for possible GM candidates in Edmonton, but I'm sure it'll be talked about all week long. You can find us at various Grey Cup events during the weekend. I'll highlight CFL Fans Fight Cancer. It'll be at the Shark Club on Georgia Street in Vancouver, Saturday afternoon from 1 until 5. $40,000 already raised. Now, I guess from Janelle in Edmonton, baker extraordinaire, she's making these mini cupcakes. I guess Peter Diakowski says he wants to take me on again. I'm okay winning again. It feels good. It feels really good beating him over and over and over again. But I saw Janelle over the weekend and she said, is 60 cupcakes enough? I'm like, I hope so. But we know Diakowski's probably just going to put about 6 away and then complain. But yeah, we'll see how it goes at the event.
We're going to need an official counter to be watching Diakowski.
That's
Argo
correct.
legend, Peter Diakowski.
Yes, he might be wearing the double blue this weekend.
I'll be keeping my eyes on him, and then I'm going to lift your arm up in the air as a champion.
Please don't be shy. I look like this. I don't exactly blend in at Grey Cup events.
If you see a giant grumpy Care Bear too, don't be shy to come over and say hi.
Are you gonna wear it every day? It could be pretty.
No. I think I just might wear it to the Thursday night.
Okay.
Team parties, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe the fans fight cancer too.
All right.
Who knows? But I'm gonna bust it out a little bit.
I like it. However you Grey Cup, enjoy your Grey Cup. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Two and Out on your favorite podcatcher. You can like, comment on YouTube as well, and hit up the website, twoandout.ca. You can find the Patreon link there. And if you don't want to support the Patreon, but you want to buy me a beer at the Grey Cup, I will also accept that in Vancouver. I'm just getting desperate now. Have a great time wherever you're watching the Grey Cup. We'll talk to you after the big game and recap the whole week that was. Take care of yourself and each other.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.